Welcome back into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Just finished up talking about the Game 4 matchup between the Timberwolves and Mavericks. I want to move on now, though, to the news that is breaking about Bronny James. He will remain in the 2024 draft. It was expected that this would be the case. Bronny was somebody who didn't have necessarily a very accomplished, you could say, college career, but there is at least enough sort of generated interest in him at the pro level, of course being LeBron James's son, that has led, it seems like, Bronny and Rich Paul, his agent, of Clutch Sports, of course, same representative of LeBron James, to believe that there is at least enough interest that Bronny can land some type of guaranteed deal in the NBA. So, like I mentioned, Rich Paul, he informed ESPN that Bronny will be remaining in the draft. The deadline for whether prospects are going to hold on to their college eligibility or not expires on Wednesday night tonight. So, sounds like Bronny is staying with it. And like I mentioned, pretty underwhelming freshman season at USC, where not all to his fault, obviously dealt with the cardiac arrest in the summertime last year that definitely derailed his usual schedule. He wasn't able to make his debut until, mid-December. So through 25 games with USC, he's averaged 4.8 points per game, 2.1 assists per game, 2.8 rebounds per game, and shot 37-27 shooting splits in 19.3 minutes per game. Now, he has been medically cleared by the NBA's fitness to play panel. So ideally, that heart is not going to be an issue for him moving forward. During the pre-draft process, it seemed like his stock took a little bit of a boost where he was able to show off some of his athletic tools. He had a 40.5-inch standing vertical that impressed a lot of scouts, and obviously, when you're talking about the bloodline of LeBron James, you would imagine that no, Bronny definitely does not have the size of a LeBron, but there is some athletic element to his game that could potentially find its way sort of fitting in an NBA environment. Now, it's sort of whether or not the skill set is ready, as we have a comment from Lil Fettuccini about how he thinks Bronny should have stayed in college basketball another year. I know that selfishly, I would have preferred to see him get another run in college basketball. It feels like wherever he ends up, playing time is going to be at a minimum for him. And I would have really liked to see him be able to sort of run the show for himself, because a lot of people are trying to project him as a 2. Now, he showed off an ability to extend his range a little bit during this pre-draft process that some people are saying he can sort of fit in as a modern 2 with some ball handling upside. I don't know about that necessarily, because of the fact that he is just 6 feet tall, 6'1". Was in that range, flat-footed. So I don't know if I necessarily see him being able to be an incredibly impactful player off the ball on offense. Now, it's definitely possible, again, with a motor and with energy. I sort of look to Peyton Pritchard of the Boston Celtics, where somebody who is very small and can definitely be taken advantage of on defense, but he does have that motor, and especially he's one of the best offensive rebounders, at least at his size, given for whatever that is. But I think that ultimately Bronny, there is still a lot to work on in his game moving forward here. But what I found really interesting, I've sort of documented my thoughts on, I think that he does need another year of sort of having the experience of being an on-the-ball player before making the jump to the NBA, but he's committed to this at this point, and that's not a massive surprise. Once again, the reports have sort of told us that we were headed in this direction, but I think that it's very interesting the way that he and Rich Paul have sort of gone about this process in terms of how he is going to sort of negotiate with other teams, where he is reportedly skipping out on a number of different workouts with different organizations that have interest in him. Shams Charania of The Athletic reported on Tuesday that Bronny has over 10 workout invites, but, quote, he's only going to visit a couple of those, and that's going to include the Lakers and the Phoenix Suns. He already attended a pro day workout for the Lakers, but he is almost sort of limiting himself in terms of the number of landing spots. And, you know, you can make the comparison. Stephon Castle is doing a similar thing. Castle, for those of you who aren't aware, he was at UConn. He was sort of the, I don't know, call him a 2/3. He believes that he's going to be a point guard, so part of his draft process so far has been not working out for teams that already have an established point guard, because he sees himself as that moving forward. But regardless, you know, he has these defensive tools and he has size, and I really like his ability to play make off of drives, actually, in terms of the conversation of whether or not he's a point guard. But he already has sort of this lottery pedigree around him, not to mention the fact that, you know, even being just the fact that he was a contributing player with upside on a championship UConn team, a dominant team. And Bronny, again, you know, not that I don't think he should deserve any type of opportunity, but he didn't necessarily earn it through any sort of his play during his college career, where he was a backup point guard on a team that struggled to even go 500 in a power conference. So, again, really interesting draft strategies here for Bronny and his team. Now, if you want to briefly look here at the draft capital for both the Lakers and Suns, I have tried to do some research into it. The Lakers could potentially have the 17th overall pick in the first round. The Pelicans have the right to take that from them, either in this year's draft or next year's. I'm not sure if there's been an exact conclusion. I know that the deadline for the Pelicans to decide whether or not they want to is June 1st. So if anybody has information in the comment section, definitely feel free to sort of correct me here. But I feel like the Pelicans would probably try and defer that pick to next year, where there seems to be more depth in the draft. But either way, you know, so the Lakers possibly have the 17th overall pick, but if the Pelicans do take control of that, the only other pick they have is number 55 overall, right at the end of the second round. So just about every team would have a chance to draft him before the Lakers do in that second round. So, I mean, I don't know. Ultimately, are any of these other teams even going to want to take a swing at Bronny? There's so much unknown with him. I can't imagine he's going to be a first-round pick, but for him to be turning down all of these different prospects is definitely an interesting strategy. The other team that we mentioned that he's planning on working out for is the Phoenix Suns. They have the 22nd overall pick in the first round, and that's it. For the Suns, they don't really have any other assets to potentially move around in the draft unless they wanted to trade down possibly from 22 and acquire some other assets. I don't know how much the price would be in this draft in particular to get a first-round pick, late first-round pick to be exact. But, you know, interesting sort of conversation there with the Suns. Obviously, a lot of people are linking, well, if LeBron James is going to follow wherever Bronny is, there was just a report that came out just before we went live here that LeBron is expected to decline his player option, but it sounds like in hopes of restructuring a new deal with the Lakers. I don't think he's going to leave the Lakers, but obviously the conversation as well with drafting Bronny is the idea of potentially getting LeBron James as well, which is why I don't think that the prospect of Bronny is worth, you know, anywhere near a lottery pick. Now, if you are, I don't know, let's say a Thunder and you have all of these draft picks and you can afford to sort of blow one away on the upside of getting a LeBron James, and I'm sure Thunder fans would probably want LeBron James if they had the opportunity to, but they already do obviously have their core set up in place and are sort of on this more long-term timeline, but can also compete now. So going to be interesting to see how they operate. But anyways, all of this to be said, I think that it is sort of a stretch that any team would use an actual valuable first round pick on Bronny. And especially because, LeBron, he has at least put it out into the world that his first priority isn't still playing with Bronny right now. Now, I'm sure before he retires, he would like to, but I definitely wouldn't sort of roll the dice if you are a team that has needs and has prospects available of just trying to get Bronny. Now, I also think when you talk about the Suns conversation with this, I mean, they would have to sign LeBron James to a veteran minimum, and I don't think LeBron is going to be willing to do that, especially not this year. I think he's going to want at least one more big payday. And that's where the Suns, they have plenty of holes that I don't think it would be worth them sort of rolling the dice on this 22nd overall pick, where I saw a mock draft earlier today where Yves Missi, the center out of Baylor, who I actually liked during the year and I think that he has some upside, I would probably just try and take a swing at somebody who can actually help them compete, because the Suns are already so all in. And I just don't think LeBron is going to sign a veteran minimum anywhere. But, ultimately, for Bronny in this whole conversation, it sounds like, from what Rich Paul has told ESPN and other teams, that the priority for them, from Bronny's perspective, is to get a developmental path for him. Quote, the team's strategy, the opportunity, and the financial commitment. That's why I'm not doing a two-way deal. Every team understands that, which kind of interesting, the idea of this player who could, in reality go undrafted if he wasn't LeBron James' son. I think probably would go undrafted, maybe a late second round pick, but for, that profile of a player to say, I need a guaranteed deal or I'm not playing for you, more times than not, that would mean, okay, well, you're not playing for us. But obviously, having that name to sort of back him up is something that, listen, and for everybody who's talking about nepotism and that it isn't fair, it is absolutely nepotism, but it's also just the reality that life isn't fair a lot of the times, and these are just, sports aren't removed from the everyday sort of happenings for your average citizen, where connections and family matters and such all matter. So I understand that you feel like other players should have more of an opportunity. I know that some people have talked about the idea that Mark Sears, guard for Alabama, could go undrafted, and he's an incredibly accomplished offensive player who also sort of has concerns with his size and such and how it's going to translate to the NBA. But the idea that he could potentially go undrafted, and that Bronny, who again hasn't really accomplished anything, could be drafted, I understand the complaints, but at the same time, life is just always going to work that way. But the idea of this whole denying the two-way contract thing and everything, definitely a very bold strategy for them, but it feels like that means there's probably some amount of certainty from his camp that he can get somebody to pay out a guaranteed contract, whether it's the Lakers or somebody else. In terms of best fits for him, I don't think he's going to be getting playing time in his rookie season, maybe not in his sophomore year. It's possible, maybe not ever. Which is just the reality of the situation. Not that I'm trying to, tear apart this 19-year-old kid that does probably have some sort of upside just based off of the genetics and everything and some aspects of his profile. But, I don't think that best fits for Bronny necessarily means anything just yet, because we got to actually make sure that he's an NBA player first. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments section. It is a very interesting conversation here with how all of this is playing out, and we will continue to monitor it as we get closer to the NBA draft in June. But that is all we have time for on this subject matter. We're going to be taking our second break here, and when we come back on the other side, I want to dive into some of the NHL playoff action from last night, where we saw the Florida Panthers even up their series against the New York Rangers. So stick with us, and we will be right back after this quick break.